you're all safe and healthy. I'm Julio Concepcion, Executive Director of the Hartford Chamber of Commerce. Let me start off by thanking each and every one of you for taking the time this morning to be with us today as we have a great conversation on the future of downtown with some fantastic panelists. As you all know, the COVID pandemic has affected our daily life and our downtowns have really taken a hit. So it's important to have these types of conversation, be able to answer questions, throw out ideas, and see how downtown Hartford can survive this now, but also set ourselves up to thrive once a sense of normalcy has taken over. So thanks again for joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you've been with us before, this is nothing new. You will be muted at all times, so no offense to anybody, but anyone that's ever been part of these types of webinars, it's a little bit of distraction when people aren't muted, so everyone on the call will be muted. The presentation will be recorded, so don't worry about taking notes or anything like that. We'll be posting the webinar on our social media channels as well as our website on the chamber side, so you'll be able to rewatch the webinar if you missed something. And then, as Margot had mentioned earlier before, there is an opportunity for question and answer. There's a little button on the bottom. Feel free to ask any questions or throw out, again, ideas. A lot of you had already sent some great questions that I've taken notes on, so thank you for that. But this is still an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have during the presentation. So feel free to use that button as you see fit. And finally, before we get started, just want to remind everyone that the Hartford Chamber of Commerce is offering free membership from now until September 1st for any business that's located within the city of Hartford. So we want to make sure that all businesses have the most relevant information and up-to-date information as we continue through this pandemic. So you can join really quickly on our website, hartfordchamberct.com. Again, any business that's located within the city of Hartford is free from now until September 1st. So please sign up and be part of the solution as we all, again, as we always like to say, Hartford's better together. So with that, let me introduce our speakers today. We have, of course, our great Mayor Luke Bronin. We have Erik Johnson, the Director of Development Services for the City of Hartford, and Jordan Polon, the Executive Director of the Hartford Business Improvement District. So before we get into a conversation about the future of downtown, I wanted to give each all of them a few minutes just to make any opening remarks that they may have, and we'll go from there. So with that, Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Julio, and I'll keep it really brief. Really looking forward to the conversation. Obviously very grateful for the Chamber's partnership and for the Metro Hartford Alliance partnership. And you know, we have got our work cut out for us in the months ahead. You know, I think we came into this pandemic with a whole lot of momentum, and as is true everywhere, it's been a pretty tough hit, and I know a lot of businesses have been devastated, and for businesses large and small, creates enormous uncertainty. But I think we need to focus both on how we recover and also whether there are, in other words, how we mitigate the damage, but also whether there are opportunities that arise from this present moment. And I think there may well be some. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and appreciate the chance.
Erik?
Yeah, again, good morning, Julio. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And again, appreciate the partnership from the Chamber and also from the bid. I echo the Mayor's sentiments exactly. You know, this has been a lot to take on for a lot of people. We're trying to work to improve our processes to make sure that doing business in Hartford is easier, and to try and be innovative and creative as much as we can to create some stability in what has become, at least for the moment, a new normal. But again, look forward to the discussion and the information share, and I'll pass it to Jordan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Polon. I'm the Executive Director of the Hartford Business Improvement District. I'm looking through the participants. I know a lot of people on the call, but for those that I don't know or who don't know me, the Hartford Business Improvement District is a 60-block special services district in the commercial core of downtown Hartford. We are at 60 blocks, the largest geographical bid in the state of Connecticut. We have we represent about 108 property owners who own property within the downtown core and a portion of Asylum Hill. Our organization concentrates on public safety and clean streets, placemaking and beautification, events and activation, marketing and communication, and some advocacy work. We are funded by an additional tax assessment paid by the property owners within our district, and that allotment and then contributions from sponsors for some of our events and placemaking activities make up the rest of our funding for all of the activities that that we do throughout our year.
Great. Again, thank you all for being part of the panel. Before we start talking about kind of the current state and what we're looking forward ahead of here in downtown, curious what your thoughts are on how phase 1 and phase 2 of the reopening has fared here in downtown. You know, some things that have worked well, some things that haven't worked well. Just curious on just your initial thoughts on the initial reopenings of downtown.
Julio, you cut out for just a minute, at least for me. Is that question for me?
Yeah.
Look, I think that given the circumstances, I think that things have gone smoothly in the sense that we've been able to work with our restaurants and help get them outdoor space and work quickly and efficiently to try to figure out some solutions that allowed them to open up during that phase 1. That said, there's an overriding challenge, which I think makes the kind of progress we'd all like to see difficult, which is that the business in the downtown is driven largely by the feet on the street that come out of the big commercial office buildings, as well as the big events that we have, whether it's at the Excel Center or Hartford Stage or the Bushnell or elsewhere. And right now, we don't have either of those things. You know, there are not a lot of people working out of their offices in the big buildings, and there are no big events. So we're really drawing, I think, on the much smaller number of people who are reporting for work in their offices and the residential community that we've been building up, but that still isn't at that critical mass that we'd all like to see. So I think that's the positive and the negative of the first couple of phases.
Let me piggyback off something you just said there, because we had a couple questions on the larger employers. Obviously, they to use your words, I mean, they drive a lot of the economy here in downtown. Has there been, Erik or Mayor or Jordan, have there been discussions with the larger employers on what they're thinking on reopening and how we can all help out in that kind of manner? I'll let you start off.
Sure. I mean, so what I have heard, I think what we have heard from most of our big employers is that they're taking a pretty cautious, conservative approach. I don't anticipate that any of those big businesses are going to be back to the full complement of employees working out of their offices for many, many months. I don't know how many months. I think that some companies are at different stages of the planning process, but at a minimum, I think that through the end of the summer and for many of them potentially through the fall, we're likely to see a very reduced physical presence.
Jordan, I know your members are large. I mean, all the properties essentially in downtown. Have you heard anything from them?
Yeah, I'll echo what the mayor said. It's everyone is really moving at their own pace. We're working with the city's economic recovery team to sort of put together a playbook about what each individual large property is doing in terms of their safety protocols as they reopen. But I agree that we're not going to see, it's not going to be a floodgate situation. It's not going to be a flip of the switch and all these folks come pouring back. I think that each individual company is taking a lot of time to really figure out what's best for them, for their employees and the folks that work in their buildings, whether it's on a corporate level or in the on the service side.
I'm glad you brought up the economy working group, Mayor. I know you had set up a series of working groups shortly after COVID hit here in the city, and one of them is the economy working group that I think all of us in Jordan, and I know Erik sits on as well. Have there, and maybe this is a question for Erik and his team, have there been some recommendations that have seen fruition. I know one of the recommendations was the PPE distributions that we all helped out with. Are there other recommendations that are coming out of that working group that that you can talk a little bit about?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's true. So first, under the mayor's direction, at the recommendation from the committee, we distributed a lot of PPE equipment to businesses throughout the city. This was really a sister effort with some stuff that the state had already been doing, but to really make sure that as businesses were going to the phase 2 reopening stage, they got some of the PPE equipment for themselves and also for their customers. So that was one. I think the overriding theme that I got out of the work group was we wanted to position Hartford as the safest city coming out of COVID. So that meant that sharing guidelines. So for small businesses and for larger corporate businesses, larger businesses to understand what is safe. And I think the second thing after the PPE that you'll see is kind of a coordinated effort with the BID and other folks on a signage campaign, which so we can in a fun way kind of talk about how to social distance and what, how to wear masks and so forth. So that in a fun but effective way, we can talk about how the city will continue to be safe and get people outside. I would say the other thing, kind of to the one thing that I think has been a good innovation that we've done is led by our planning director. We've really done a lot to consolidate and expedite approval processes for things downtown. So the stuff with the restaurants and outdoor dining and also outdoor activities is now a one-stop shopping exercise. So we have an online process with a single point of entry that coordinates 5 different departments. So in response to the pandemic, I think we're trying to be more efficient and innovative in terms of how we can provide customer service.
That's great. I know that policy change has been successful here in downtown. I'm curious, Mr. Mayor, are there other policy changes that you're thinking about, or that the state can help out with to increase feet on the street, similar to what you guys did on outdoor dining and how easy that planning process and zoning changes have been? Oh, Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks. I don't know that there's much that at least comes to mind. Maybe it's a lack of imagination, but that comes to mind immediately for what the state could be doing. I think the state made it pretty easy and streamlined for us to do what we wanted to do in terms of quickly permitting and approving outdoor dining and expansions of outdoor dining. Again, I think the biggest challenge for feet on the street are the rules that govern large gatherings. Obviously, those, I hope that our progress continues, but given the numbers that we're seeing elsewhere in the country and the news today about the potential for that uptick around the country to impact the pace of our own reopening, I think we've got to recognize that we're going to be living under the cloud of that for quite a while. I am very interested in seeing where there are opportunities to make some of the outdoor dining that we've helped to facilitate more permanent. And I'm eager to do that. And where there are, I think there are some obvious candidates for that. For me, Pratt Street emerges as an obvious candidate where I would love to see us move toward more permanent, fully pedestrian activity. Other streets where we've made some changes, like over on Allen, they're a little trickier because you have more access issues to businesses, to parking lots, to stores there. So that said, I'm really open to any and all suggestions, and I'm eager to work with the BID and with the chamber if there are places where you think we can make some of those changes permanent, including road closures. I'm all for road closures where they can be done in a way that doesn't doesn't have a really negative impact on other businesses and activities in the city. So that's a part of it. The other thing is, which is not directly to your question, but I think it's important to say, one of the important recommendations out of the economy working group was a clearer set of communications and guidelines or guidance coming to the business community. And I would say 2 things. One, I take that to heart, and we've tried partly through the material that was passed out in those packets that were distributed, as Erik mentioned, and partly just through updates and public briefings that I've done to get that information out. That said, the reality is that much of the guidance and decision making that ultimately will have the biggest effect on business decisions is coming at the state level. And so I also want to be conscious of the difficulty of having multiple sources of information coming at people at the same time, and to a large extent think we have to defer to the guidance that comes out of the state.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned Pratt Street, because we did get a couple questions on both activation on Pratt Street or Front Street or Allen Street. So Jordan, just kicking it to you, I know the bid's done some incredible activation on Pratt Street over the last several years. Where do you see the future of Pratt Street? Obviously, to the mayor's point on we're a little handcuffed on the amount of people that can be there with the governor's protocols. But where do you see it? Where's Pratt Street now? Where do you see it in the future?
Well, with Pratt Street, we've been really fortunate. About twice a week since mid-March, I have been on seminars and webinars and part of conversations with other executive directors and practitioners of downtowns around North America, talking about what each one of us is doing. And at the beginning of March and into the rest of the months that followed, we're seeing cities scrambling to put together these road closures and really struggling to be able to offer the kinds of things that might allow businesses to have that outdoor dining piece. We were so fortunate here in Hartford to have a model that we have been using for 3 years. We did not have those same struggles. So where we saw some of our colleagues really having a hard time trying to get some of those street closures happening with the support of the city, and that, again, we've been activating Pratt Street in the way that people were striving for in this pandemic for the past 3 years. So we were able to immediately close the street and put up our tables and chairs on May 20th, whereas a lot of other folks around the country were lagging a little bit behind in some of those areas. In terms of where Pratt Street is now, we have 2 restaurants that are putting out their tables and chairs for more extended dining. We used to close the street during the day. We did an audit. We talked to every merchant on the street, talked to them about what their operating hours were, when they needed the street to be accessible for deliveries or for curbside pickup, and when the restaurants were comfortable opening based on the number of patrons that they were seeing do curbside pickup and the conversations they were having. And then we adjusted those hours back. So right now, Pratt Street is open to vehicular traffic during the day until 3, at which point we closed the street. We put up tables and chairs for people to safely socialize. They've always been over 6 feet apart, which was great. And those restaurants are able to make use of the later dining hours when they are seeing people who may have been office workers during the day who are just missing their restaurants and coming back at night. And we're hoping to look at that same model, shift a little bit. The daytime need for the restaurants right now just isn't there for the vast majority of them. But we're watching the trends, and we're watching the numbers of people and who is downtown right now, and we're trying to make our decisions based on as much data as possible.
Can you repeat the hours of the patio?
Sure. Pratt Street right now is pedestrian only from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. Okay,
thanks. So I hope to see a lot of people there.
And we have performers coming back, small, more like paid busking, but we do have, a singer-songwriter who's out on Pratt Street between 5 and 6 every Friday.
Erik, the mayor in his opening comments had mentioned the momentum the city had prior to COVID, which was spot on. We had 2 large-scale projects, one just outside of downtown in Park and Main, and then, of course, Dono near the Yard Goat Stadium. Can you just give us an update on where those 2 projects are? I mean, they're critical for the future of our downtown.
Yeah, I actually thanks for the question, and I guess the answer is that the momentum hasn't stopped. I mean, there are people who still believe in Hartford and have continued to do their due diligence to do projects. The land lease for the Park and Main development closed last week. We think that construction will start in the next 6 to 8 weeks after that. And there is a community meeting about it that will be scheduled towards the end of July that will make sure people get notice about and can participate in. It's going to be 122 unit build development on both sides of the street with about 8 different retail and restaurant opportunities there. So we look that will help continue to activate kind of Main Street and then kind of create a new gateway from the downtown up to Park Street into where Hartford Hospital is. So we're looking forward to that. And then also right before the pandemic, we completed our transaction with Randy Salvatore to do the first of the Dono buildings. And that's gone through its planning and zoning approval process. And again, that's an early fall construction start date that we anticipate too. So the momentum hasn't stopped. Some of those projects will continue, and we look for those additions to our kind of downtown extended city.
Great. We have a question here from one of the participants, and it's an Iqual related question. And I know, Jordan, I believe you sit on the Iqual board, and I think Erik does as well. The question is just what components of the Iqual plan will likely be implemented over the next 2 years? Not sure if that's an easy question to answer, but I know Iqual is moving towards working with or shifting a little bit of the focus to Hartford 400. So wondering if anybody could comment on that.
Yeah, I can speak to that really briefly. So one, I think the efforts that Iqual has been doing in partnership with the city around Bushnell Park will continue. The kind of the garden piece probably will take a little longer to do just because we have to fundraise to make sure that works. And the lighting project that again starts in Bushnell that we hope will extend to parts of Main Street will continue. So Iqual work will continue. I think it'll be a little bit slower just because we're in a different environment. And then in terms of things like Winterfest and other things that have been staples, I think those are still in the to be determined phase based upon what happens with the virus. But the group continues to be active. We'll continue to deliver programming and be a value add to our efforts.
Anything, Jordan?
I think that Erik is, I don't want to speak necessarily for Jackie or for Iqual specifically. Erik, I think that was a great summary.
And shout out to Jackie Mandyke for all the hard work she's put in over the years on Iqual. So shout out to her.
Julio, can I just jump in on that real quick? Because Erik mentioned the Hartford 400 effort, and as I hope most of the folks know on this call know, we recently finalized our 15-year city plan, which looks forward to the 400th anniversary of the city in 2035, and which you can get at our city website and get at the plan website as well. And if you haven't looked through it, I really encourage you to, because I think one of the in some ways the timing couldn't be better, because coming out of this pandemic, we're going to have to all rally together and make sure that we're pushing in the same direction toward the same goal and moving as fast as we can. And so I think to have a plan that was finalized really in the early days of this pandemic after many months of engagement and is a pretty ambitious plan in many areas, including economic development and real estate development, is a great organizing tool that we now have. And I encourage everybody who is obviously, if you're on this call, you care about Hartford. And so I encourage everybody to read through that and I hope embrace it. And then, let's work together to try to make progress as quickly as we can towards it when we come out of this thing, or as we come out of this thing.
Shifting focus a little bit and going a little bit towards the residential piece here in downtown. We have obviously a captive audience here in downtown with the amount of residential that is spurred up over the last decade or so. There's always been a little bit of a disconnect between the people that actually live here and our small businesses. I'm curious if there's any ideas, and I'm looking at you, Jordan, specifically just because of your work with street activation, how we get our residential piece to our residents to really go to and visit our small businesses here in downtown. Are there any ideas that you might have that you've seen, across the country that might help us here?
One thing that we're seeing across the country, and I 100% firmly believe it, is that we can provide information right now to residents and to people, but the rate at which people come back is going to be completely tied to their to their level of comfortability in coming back to some of these places. And although our first instinct was absolutely to start crafting a big marketing campaign about come back to downtown, the more we see in terms of what's happening here at home and what's happening around the country is that it's, unless you are an essential worker, it has become a really personal choice. And the thing that we can do through Hartford.com and through the work that the Chamber and the city are doing is to make sure that people know what level of safety they can expect when they go to these individual businesses. And on the Hartford.com side, we're making sure that we are keeping really updated and current lists of which restaurants are open, which are doing curbside, which are doing outdoor dining, which are doing indoor dining. So information is a huge part of it, and it is certainly a two-way street. So as much information as we can put out there, if people aren't coming to Hartford.com to look for it or aren't going to the websites of their favorite restaurants, it's going to be a much more challenging piece to get people to come back. And I think that in terms of the physical spaces that we're talking about, we thought very much that we were going to be leaning on our events and activation as we do every summer. Last year, we did 91 events over the course of a calendar year. And we are shifting that a little bit right now to concentrate on physical space improvements. So some more interesting, what we call it, permarary, some slightly permanent, slightly temporary seating amenities, or some smaller scale mural projects that we can do more quickly with our individual property owners to make sure that when people start to come back and as they come back, that it feels like a welcoming place, but also to make sure that the people who are downtown on a daily basis, and there are a lot of them, it is not a ghost town downtown. We are missing a corporate piece, but there are a lot of restaurants and there are a lot of people from the neighborhoods who are in our downtown every single day, and we need to make sure that the work we are doing is as much for our people as it is for the corporate community. So we're really making sure right now that our spaces feel welcoming and inclusive to people who are residents in the city, who are coming through to their essential jobs, and to the people who are comfortable right now in being in our downtown and coming back to our businesses.
Hey, Julio, do you mind? I just want to make one point kind of tying to what Jordan said is I think this is in terms of creating that greater connectivity between the people who live downtown. There's also a great opportunity for them to explore some of the neighborhood-based establishments and restaurants and shops that are there, which I think need their patronage to help survive, but also really great and interesting special places where they can actually get a different feel of what Hartford is than just what the downtown routine would be. Great example in the last month, the Parkville Market has opened up, which has 12 different types of vendors, and Jordan has actually taken me on a tour of various places in Hartford, whether it's El Mercado or some of the great Italian pastry shops that are around town. So I think this is not just an opportunity to look at what is happening downtown, but really connecting the people downtown to the great opportunities that exist in our neighborhoods to really, as the mayor said earlier, bring the community as a whole forward and really embrace the diversity of what Hartford is.
Right, which is why it's those two particular projects, both Dono and Park and Main, are so critical because they are the connectivity from our downtown into our neighborhood. So sticking on the residential piece, Erik, I know there's a couple realtors on the call today. Curious if the city talks to developers when they're developing these large scale projects on the size of the apartments, the size of the units that they go into downtown. As a father and a family person that lives in downtown, I'm fortunate enough to be able to live in somewhere that has 2 to 3 bedrooms, but there's not a lot of options here in downtown for that. Curious if you guys have that conversation with developers as they come into the city.
We do, and I'll let you. We definitely do, and it's really trying to find the balance of what becomes financially feasible for them in terms of risk and return, and what we're projecting demand to be. There's always that tug and, that dynamic between trying to attract a younger single workforce to feed the corporate, corporate environment, but then also making sure that we have affordable, accessible, family-oriented housing. So we're trying to do that balance. Sometimes economics oversees what we think are longer-term interests, but we are definitely trying to find places to do that and take our shots to create more of those 2 to 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom type pieces. But sometimes those are difficult to underwrite, as they are when we're working in an environment where even some of the market rate developments continue to be subsidized. I'm not sure, Mayor, if you want to add to that. But
no, I think that's right. I think it's, a lot of it just comes down to the rents that that developers can get and the demand that they see. And that so far, I think the other piece is that so far the demand for the smaller units has been so strong that it's sort of the surest bet. All right. I mean, saying it in sort of the positive way rather than the negative way, I think it's that the surest, least risky bet is to keep delivering to the market what the market has been absorbing very, very quickly. And until the coronavirus, not with no indications of slowing or slacking. I would love to see more, 2 bedrooms built. I'd also love to see condos built, but the financing for condos is particularly tough. I think right now our focus is, I will say this, at least for my part, I think my focus and I think that CRDA's focus has been on achieving critical mass, whatever way we can do it, that we need as many people as possible. And however we can achieve that critical mass the best, we should pursue.
Great. Just a reminder to the people looking or listening to us, use the Q&A button. If you have a question, we might not get to all the questions, but ask them anyways. If we don't get to your question, we will get you an answer afterwards. So please keep using the Q&A button. Mayor, we have a specific question for you from someone from our friends over at Emphasis. Curious if the city has taken any best practices from learning from other large cities like New York or London or Boston.
Is this with respect to the coronavirus?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think we did it better than New York. I'm not familiar enough with London to speak to it. I mean, we've been paying close attention to what other cities are doing from the very start. There were cities like Jersey City that did a much more dramatic shutdown a little bit earlier than we did. There were cities that waited a lot longer, just as there were states that shut down certain industry sectors that Connecticut didn't shut down. I guess what I would say is we've been paying very close attention to what other places are doing. But I feel pretty proud of the state of Connecticut, and I feel pretty good about what we've done locally to try to strike the right balance. And I think that's reflected in the numbers that you're seeing right now. Connecticut is the only state in the country to see the pace of reduction that we've seen over the past few weeks. And that same trend has been repeated here in Hartford. And we've been working hard to spread the word about those basic precautions that everybody needs to take, mask wearing in particular, but washing hands and physical distance as well. And so, we're going to continue to pay close attention as other cities potentially see a rebound. We're obviously troubled by what's happening in some of the states that didn't take this as seriously from the start. But I guess thus far, I feel pretty good about the balance that both Connecticut and Hartford has struck.
Another huge industry here in downtown Hartford that was hit really badly during COVID was the arts and cultural organizations here in the city. Any comments that you would have on ways that the city can help, that BID can help, even on the chamber side, to help our friends in the arts and culture organizations here in downtown?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that we all are going to have to raise the volume on calls for financial assistance for arts institutions, a financial relief package to arts institutions that have been very, very hard hit. And I know some have gotten some PPP grants, but the scale of those and the duration of those is not nearly enough. I think the opportunity to raise our voices in that advocacy effort will be after, God willing, the Senate and the House approve another round of federal assistance. And I imagine that if and when they do, a good chunk of that is going to come in the form of state grants to states that'll then be distributed out. Now, we obviously have lots of needs, including lots of very pressing human services needs and basic needs that have to be met, whether we're talking about food or connectivity to facilitate education or many other things. But if anything like the scale of assistance package that has been proposed is passed down in Washington, I think we need to fight really, really hard for the state to provide some meaningful financial relief in a timely way to arts institutions that without that relief are going to have a hard time coming back. And for us, I think we have to be very clear that those institutions are not nice to haves. They are the lifeblood of Hartford's economic activity.
And I think that, just to echo what the mayor said, it is the lifeblood of so much of our economic activity, but it's also the lifeblood of so many of our residents. I mean, so many people. We have this incredible, strong, and thriving arts community in terms of our theaters and our musicians and our individual artists who are living all throughout the city and all of our different neighborhoods, who really rely on these institutions and the culture that these institutions provide to be able to make their livings and to make their rent and to buy their food. And I don't think that that you can underplay the importance of being supportive, both on a federal and state level, but on a personal level too. So if you do have a theater that you love, that you frequent, and you are in a position where you're able to make a donation, this is certainly a great time. Or buying tickets for future events, whether you think that they're going to happen or not. I just enrolled my kid in the Hartford Stage's virtual summer camp, which starts next week for her. And I think that right now, all of the support we can offer, not only to the institutions, but to the individuals who work at those institutions, this is a good time to keep those things in mind.
Right. And Julio, I would just add, when the I guess the spigot gets turned back on and you can responsibly start to do some of these events, then the important thing is making sure that we support them and patronize them. They'll be smaller scale, they'll be slightly different, but to the extent that we can support them by our attendance or by our patronage and financial support, it's really important, because it'll speak to how we come back from this and then reestablish I think the cultural advantage that we have within the state and in the region as a place where people can get that type of experience. So when that stuff happens, please support them. We'll do our job to make sure that people know about it, but please support them in resources, time, and energy.
Thanks, Eric. I saw Jordan get excited when you used the word spigot, because I know that's your favorite bar in Hartford. So another important institution here in downtown is our obviously our colleges, right? Our universities, UConn, Capital, Trinity, and St. Joe's here in downtown. How do we capitalize on them for the future of downtown? How do we, again, galvanize and take these great institutions in such a small area and make ourselves a little bit for the future of downtown? I know we've always talked about Hartford being a college town. How do we actually do it? Any thoughts on that?
Mary, do you want to offer some thoughts, or do you want me to go?
I have lots of thoughts. The biggest thing, which would make the biggest difference, would be for colleges to put some residential, residential footprint in the downtown or close to the downtown and concentrate. We have, if you look at the city of Hartford and the Hartford region, we've got upwards of 30,000 students within a 10-mile radius or so. I mean, that's a big concentration, but it's pretty spread out on campuses that are often pretty insular. And I think without a doubt, the biggest way would be to get some of those students physically in the center of the city to the greatest extent possible. Short of that, it's engaging those students in the arts, cultural, sports life of the city, and I think one of our weaknesses right now, which we fully acknowledge and have been working on plans to address, is nightlife is not as strong as it needs to be. and trying to strike that good balance between a nightlife that is vibrant and attractive and fun for college students and those who are just out of college, and also not disruptive and unattractive for all the folks who are trying to get to move into residential units in the downtown, is a really important balance to strike. So we're trying to do that. We got a long way to go. I will highlight that as one of our weaknesses that we fully acknowledge.
Speaking of nightlife, when I was in college here in downtown,
Many years ago,
and from what I remember, the areas around Union Place was really the entertainment district of downtown. What are the plans in that particular area? I mean, it's a untapped at this point potential here in our downtown. Erik, I don't know if you've heard anything and what's going on over there.
No, I would say, this, as the mayor alluded to, this is something that he feels passionately about, as a gap in the city. And our team is actually working on plans to kind of create a couple different entertainment zones within the city. That area has been identified as one of those kind of entertainment districts. We want to create some incentives for people to bring that type of entertainment lifestyle business back. Fortunately and unfortunately, the world's evolved since we were in college a little bit. So the club experience is not the club experience of yesteryear. So now we're trying to think smartly about how to bring those experiences back. But I think, to the mayor's point earlier, some of that is about critical mass. And as we've gotten closer to critical mass, we can offer kind of a better experience because we have better people. We have more people in. I think that entertainment district concept ties into the continued development philosophy, where less of our surface parking lots are surface parking lots and they're more structures. But to your point, some in neighborhoods and definitely in the area around Union Station, where coaches and scores and some of those other places were years ago, we're trying to bring that a similar but different experience back to the community. And that's a little bit delayed because of COVID, but there are plans to try and kick that off again.
Great. I know it's only been a couple days since.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I wasn't quick enough on the unmute, but the other thing that I think is important to that Union Station area is linking it to the city, through the development of Allen Street. And there are some projects that are happening on Allen Street. There's been some buildings that are renovated that are in both residential and also with retail space. And then there's also the opportunity that I hope will come from the renovation of the Excel Center. And through that, I hope creating a little bit better relationship between the Excel Center and that backside that goes on Allen Street. That corridor from Union Station to the Excel Center, I think, could be a really important spine in the city. And I think increasing that connection between the Union Place area and the Allen part of Allen Street that's near the Excel Center is both critical and an opportunity.
Speaking of entertainment assets, it's been just a couple days since minor league baseball announced that there will be no baseball this year, which is unfortunate, obviously, for fans of our yard goats. And again, I know it's only been a couple days, but that's a huge asset that we have that has, it's outdoors. You can do some social distancing things. Are there any ideas that you guys have on how to capitalize on Dunkin' Donuts Park, using it for this summer for something other than baseball?
I'll say, I know we've started to have some conversations. I don't think we have anything that we can formally announce at this point, but it is something fair to do, and it's also until we get some greater latitude from the governor's guidance, limited in terms of how we can plan for a large scale events right now. So that's something that we'll get back to you on. But I would say just on the flip side, though, the soccer season has not been canceled, and the Hartford Athletic is playing. They have their first game on July 10th, and I think they have a second home game on the 17th. So we will have kind of sports entertainment within the city of Hartford at Dillon Stadium, and you'll hear more about that from the team and us in terms of how to go to those events and, be social distance and be outside and support a home team. So we will get back in terms of what we can think about in terms of the Yard Goat State, the Dunkin' Donuts Stadium, as the governor's guidance evolves, allow us to do that. But I did want to celebrate the fact that we still do have summer sports in Hartford with the Hartford Athletic Soccer Club, and encourage people to go to their website, check out the schedule and the rules for attending.
Great, Eric. You on their payroll? Jeez, that's pretty
Right,
good.
it's a pivot. It's a pivot.
I like it. I like it. We do have a question from somebody here. It says, and I don't know if anyone can answer this, but the question's, will the beer garden that was so successful last year, are there ideas on opening it this year? I know, again, there's some social distancing things that we all have to consider, but have there been any talks with our great breweries here in downtown, or here in Hartford?
Julio, you may be able to answer this question better than we can. So I don't know. Is that a question to yourself?
Yeah, I needed to throw it out there.
Look, the short answer for me is, we had a lot of discussions about planning for the beer garden this year prior to the pandemic. I think my assumption and a lot of folks' assumptions for a while has been that wasn't going to be feasible given everything that's happened and given the limitations, but those limitations are changing, the rules are changing, and there may well be a way to do it that's consistent with restrictions, but I at least have not had that conversation with the organizers.
Okay.
Have you?
No, I haven't either. And if I had to guess, I think we're skipping this year.
Yeah.
But,
it's important. I remember on a lot of these activities, just as restaurants have had to make the calculation that even though they could open outdoors, it didn't always economically make sense to open outdoors. And that may be the same kind of calculation in terms of the amount of effort and logistics it takes to set up an outdoor environment that's consistent with social distancing. It may not bring in enough revenue or create enough activity to justify it. And we just have to be honest about that.
Right.
Great. So I know we're running right on up time here. We have 5 minutes left. So just wanted to give each one of you just a few minutes to say any closing remarks. Again, appreciate you being with us. But Jordan, I'll start with you. Any last words here as we move I'm trying to get this a little bit more positive on the future of downtown. What do you see as the great things that are happening here in the city?
Right now it's, we end up in a business where you put out a lot of fires. We're a very, just because of the nature of how we are structured, we are a very reactive organization. So we were in a really good space to be able to react to all of the challenges surrounding the pandemic. And I think one of the things that we're the most looking forward to is really being able to take as much advantage of this crisis as we possibly can and do the research on what our downtown looks like without that corporate community. So right now we're really focusing on some things that we can do to make our downtown not only welcoming and inclusive to the corporate community, but to increase the want of the folks in the neighborhood to spend more time downtown, and to make sure that we're creating spaces that are welcoming to everyone, no matter where they're from, socioeconomic. We want to make sure that we are taking advantage of the time that we have to plan and research what our downtown could look like when people start to come back together. Because I think that's the thing that is the most exciting opportunity is just to be able to look at how our downtown can operate when we're better able to meld the corporate entities with the rest of the city in events and activities that are taking place downtown.
Great. Erik?
Well, again, thanks Julio for the invitation to participate in the panel. I think the mayor said it earlier. We were on a really great clip before kind of COVID hit, and I think we'll continue to be there. This has definitely been a blow, but I think that struggle reveals character. And I think that throughout this, we've really seen the character and the spirit of the city and its resiliency. And I think that, you know, when you look at the map, we're doing a lot better than everyone else. And we should, take that as a representative of our character. I would continue it to explore where people feel safe, to some of the other neighborhood venues and stuff that's open, and to continue to come out and know that my boss, who you'll hear next, is continually pushing us to be innovative and creative to make sure that we're as safe, open, and welcoming as possible, and continue to be the destination place for this part of the state.
Thanks, Erik. Mr. Mayor?
Well, first of all, thanks so much again for pulling this together and for the invitation to be part of it. I don't know how many folks who are listening to this were a part of the Metro Hartford Alliance conversation recently, but from my standpoint, the challenges we've got are obvious, but I really think that there are some significant opportunities right now. You know, you're seeing in parts of Connecticut an influx of residents from New York City. I think that this pandemic and the disruption of it is causing a lot of people to ask, what kind of quality of life do I want? What kind of community do I want to be a part of? What kind of living arrangement do I want to have? Where do I want to be? And to me, that's a significant opportunity for us to really market hard, especially in the Boston and New York areas, and especially to people who may have roots here already and who may think of this as an opportunity to come back. We know that we've been losing people for a long time in Hartford, in the Hartford area, in the state of Connecticut. So it's not just about attracting people who've got no connection here. We've got a gold mine potentially in the number of people who are from Hartford, from Greater Hartford, from Connecticut, chose to live elsewhere, but may reassess that decision right now. And so on the one hand, I think it makes it all the more important for us to come out of this with as much energy as possible and recapture that momentum and demonstrate it quickly. I think it also is going to take some very deliberate efforts to tell our story in those metro areas nearby. And I know that's something that the Alliance is working on. It's something we're working on in the city. We want to do that together. And I hope it's something that some of our companies decide to do in concert as well.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for being part of this panel. This has been a great discussion. Thank you all to the participants that were watching and listening to us today. Just a reminder, if we didn't get to your question, I promise we will get you an answer to those questions. And I hope everyone has a great holiday weekend. And thanks again, and thanks to the staff at the Alliance, both Margot and Mia, for helping out today. So thanks again. Have a good holiday weekend, and go Hartford.